Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a room and completely forgotten why you went there? Have you ever been in the middle of a conversation and the word you're looking for just vanishes, like it was right there and then nothing? Or maybe you've noticed that your focus isn't what it used to be, that your memory feels a little slower, a little cloudier than it did 10 years ago. Most people chalk this up to aging. They say, well, I'm getting older, this is just what happens. And here's the problem with that thinking. It's not entirely true, and it's costing people their quality of life, their independence, and ultimately their health span. Because here's what the science actually tells us. The brain is not a fixed organ that slowly deteriorates over time like a rusting machine. It is one of the most dynamic, regenerative, and adaptable tissues in your entire body when you give it what it needs. The field of neuroscience has completely overturned the old idea that you're born with a set number of brain cells and that's it. We now know the brain can grow new neurons. It can repair damaged connections. It can build stronger memory circuits even in your 50s, 60s, and 70s. But here's the critical distinction. The brain's ability to repair and regenerate doesn't happen randomly. It happens under very specific biological conditions. And those conditions are almost entirely shaped by your daily habits, what you eat, when you sleep, how you move, and how you manage the hormonal environment inside your body. Now, what deeply concerns me as a physician is that we are living through a global epidemic of cognitive decline. In 2020, an estimated 54 million people worldwide had Alzheimer's disease or other forms of dementia, and that number is projected to grow dramatically. Meanwhile, millions more are experiencing what researchers call mild cognitive impairment, the slow erosion of memory, focus, and mental sharpness that quietly builds for decades before it becomes a diagnosis. And what we know from cutting-edge neuroscience is that this process begins far earlier than most people realize, often in your 30s and 40s, driven not by bad luck or bad genes, but by daily habits that are systematically depriving the brain of what it needs to function and heal. The good news, and there is very powerful good news here, lifestyle factors have a greater impact on whether you develop memory-related diseases than your genetics do. Let me say that again. Your habits matter more than your DNA when it comes to your brain's long-term health. So today, I want to walk you through 5 science-backed habits that top neurologists know have the power to boost memory, protect brain cells, and this is the part most people don't realize actually trigger deep repair processes inside your brain while you sleep. These aren't theories. These are mechanisms that researchers have now mapped at the cellular and molecular level. And when you understand how they work, you'll never look at your nightly routine the same way again. Stay with me because every single one of these insights is actionable starting today. Let's begin with what I believe is the most important and least understood piece of the entire puzzle. What happens inside your brain while you sleep and why most people are missing out on a biological process so powerful that neuroscientists have called it one of the greatest discoveries in modern brain science. Your brain, like every other organ in your body, produces metabolic waste as it works throughout the day. Every time a neuron fires, every time you think a thought, form a memory, or process information, byproducts are produced. The most dangerous of these byproducts are proteins called amyloid-beta and tau, the same proteins that accumulate in the brains of Alzheimer's patients and form the plaques and tangles that destroy cognitive function. Here's the question that scientists spent decades trying to answer. How does the brain get rid of these toxic proteins? The body has the lymphatic system, a vast network of vessels that clears waste from tissues throughout the body. But the brain sits behind the blood-brain barrier, largely isolated from the rest of the body. So how does it clean itself? The answer was discovered in 2012 by Dr. Maiken Nedergaard at the University of Rochester, and it fundamentally changed neuroscience. She found that the brain has its own dedicated waste clearance system called the glymphatic system. Here's how it works. During deep sleep, specialized brain cells called astrocytes shrink in size. This shrinking opens up channels around the blood vessels in your brain, And through these channels, cerebrospinal fluid, the clear liquid that bathes your brain and spine, rushes in, flushing through the brain tissue and carrying toxic waste products out. Think of it like a dishwasher running at night. The machine doesn't clean while you're cooking and eating. It cleans after. And your brain does the same thing. This is remarkable on its own, but what makes it urgent is this. A landmark 2025 study published in Nature Communications, one of the most rigorous scientific journals in the world, directly tested whether this glymphatic system clears amyloid-beta and tau in humans. And what they found confirmed what was suspected. During normal sleep, glymphatic clearance significantly increased the removal of these Alzheimer's biomarkers compared to people who were sleep deprived. The data was clear. Sleep is not passive downtime. Sleep is when your brain runs its most critical maintenance program. So let me explain the practical implications. To maximize glymphatic clearance, you need deep, slow-wave sleep, specifically the kind of sleep that happens in the first half of the night in those long restorative cycles. And there are 3 things that powerfully activate this system and 3 things that shut it down. What activates it? Sleeping on your side, research in animals suggests the lateral sleeping position enhances glymphatic flow compared to sleeping on your back or stomach, maintaining a cool bedroom temperature, ideally between 65 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit, and going to bed consistently at the same time each night, which stabilizes your circadian rhythm and deepens your slow-wave sleep cycles. What shuts it down? Alcohol, even in moderate amounts. Alcohol significantly disrupts the architecture of sleep, reducing the amount of restorative deep sleep you get, which is exactly when the glymphatic system is most active. Sleep medications that sedate you artificially can block the natural deep sleep stages, and critically chronic sleep deprivation of even 1 to 2 hours per night is enough to impair glymphatic function significantly over time. If you are sleeping less than 7 hours, your brain is not fully cleaning itself each night, period. Before we dive deeper, I want to connect with our community. If you're new here, welcome to BioBytes YouTube channel, where we break down health science into actionable strategies. We're building an amazing global community of health-conscious individuals, and we'd love for you to join us. Hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you never miss our evidence-based content. And I'm genuinely curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your country or city in the comments. We have viewers spanning 6 continents, and seeing our international community grow is incredibly inspiring. Your engagement keeps us motivated to research and create content that truly serves you. Now let's talk about the most powerful molecule your brain produces, one that most people have never heard of, but that every neurologist and neuroscientist knows is absolutely central to memory, learning, and the brain's ability to repair and regenerate itself. That molecule is called BDNF, Brain-Derived Neurotrophic Factor. Let me give you an analogy. Think of BDNF as fertilizer for your brain. Just as plants need nutrients in the soil to grow strong roots, make new branches, and survive harsh conditions, your neurons need BDNF to grow new connections, strengthen existing synapses, and survive the wear and tear of aging. BDNF literally promotes the growth, survival, and differentiation of neurons. It is the biochemical signal that tells your brain, build more, repair more, adapt more. The hippocampus, the region of the brain that is most critical for forming new memories and spatial navigation, is one of the areas most richly supplied with BDNF. And researchers have consistently found that people with Alzheimer's disease have significantly reduced BDNF levels in the hippocampus. People with depression, which is strongly linked to memory problems, also show reduced BDNF. And people who live sedentary, high-sugar, sleep-deprived lifestyles, which describes a large percentage of the modern population, show chronically suppressed BDNF production. Here's what the research shows about how to turn BDNF production on, and this is where it gets practically powerful. Aerobic exercise is the single most potent BDNF trigger known to science. A 2024 review analyzing the impact of exercise on BDNF levels found that aerobic exercise, particularly high-intensity aerobic activity, significantly increases hippocampal BDNF production. And this matters because BDNF doesn't just protect existing neurons, it actively stimulates neurogenesis, the growth of entirely new brain cells. This is not metaphor. This is measurable at the molecular level. Exercise works by triggering metabolic and molecular signals from the muscle, liver, and bones that travel to the brain and converge on BDNF signaling. The result includes increased synaptogenesis, more connections between neurons, greater cerebral blood flow, and increased gray matter volume in the hippocampus. Now, here is an equally important point about the dietary side of BDNF. A rigorous meta-analysis published in 2024 examined the effect of omega-3 fatty acids, specifically the DHA and EPA found in fatty fish, algae, and fish oil, on BDNF concentrations. The analysis, covering 12 randomized controlled trials involving nearly 600 participants, concluded that omega-3 fatty acids significantly increase serum BDNF levels. This is why neurologists consistently recommend fatty fish like wild salmon, sardines, and mackerel as foundational brain foods. These aren't just good for your heart, they are directly fueling the molecule that your brain uses to repair and rebuild itself. At the same time, a high-carbohydrate, high-sugar diet does the opposite. Research demonstrates that insulin resistance and chronic high glucose exposure negatively reduce BDNF levels and shrink hippocampal volume. In simple terms, the same diet that gives you metabolic disease is the same diet that degrades your memory. The connection between your metabolic health and your brain health is not coincidental. It is mechanistic, direct, and now deeply supported by evidence. The protocol here is practical. Aim for at least 30 minutes of moderate to vigorous aerobic exercise, brisk walking, cycling, swimming on most days of the week. Include fatty fish in your diet 2 to 3 times per week. If you don't eat fish, consider a high-quality omega-3 supplement providing at least 1 gram of combined DHA and EPA daily, and begin reducing refined carbohydrates and added sugars not just for metabolic health, but specifically for your brain. This brings us to the third habit one that sits at the crossroads of metabolic health and brain health, and that I believe is one of the most under-discussed drivers of cognitive decline in the modern world: the relationship between insulin resistance and memory loss. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your brain, despite representing only about 2% of your body weight, consumes roughly 20% of the body's total energy. It runs almost entirely on glucose, and for glucose to enter brain cells, insulin signaling must function correctly. When insulin resistance develops, when cells throughout the body stop responding properly to insulin, the consequences ripple far beyond blood sugar and body fat. They reach directly into the brain. Let me use a simple analogy. Imagine the insulin receptor on a brain cell like a lock, and insulin like a key. When the lock works perfectly, the key opens the door and glucose flows in to fuel the neuron. But in insulin resistance, the lock becomes sticky and jammed. The key doesn't turn as easily. And so the neuron struggles to get the fuel it needs, even when there's plenty of glucose in the bloodstream. The neuron becomes energy-starved, inflamed, and functionally impaired. This is so well established that some researchers have begun calling Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes a metabolic disease of the brain. And an important clinical trial published in the journal Cell Metabolism in 2024 provided direct evidence of this connection. In the study, 40 cognitively intact older adults with insulin resistance underwent either a 5.2 intermittent fasting protocol or a healthy living diet for 8 weeks. Both groups showed improvements in insulin signaling biomarkers in neuron-derived particles pulled from the blood, meaning the neurons themselves were responding better to insulin. Both groups also showed reductions in their brain age gap estimate, a measure of how old your brain looks biologically on MRI, and improvements in executive function and memory. This is powerful evidence that reversing insulin resistance doesn't just improve your waistline or your blood sugar. It literally slows down the rate at which your brain is aging and directly improves cognitive performance. So, what is the best dietary strategy for restoring brain insulin sensitivity? The evidence points strongly to reducing the glycemic load of your diet, meaning fewer refined carbohydrates, fewer added sugars, more fiber, more healthy fats, and more protein. Intermittent fasting, particularly the 16-8 approach, where you eat within an 8-hour window and fast for 16 hours, has been shown to enhance insulin sensitivity significantly. During the fasting window, as glucose drops, the liver begins producing ketone bodies, particularly a molecule called beta-hydroxybutyrate. And ketones are remarkable for the brain. They cross the blood-brain barrier easily, they fuel neurons efficiently, and they actually trigger mechanisms that reduce amyloid accumulation and support glymphatic function. Research has shown that intermittent fasting reduces brain beta amyloid through multiple mechanisms and is associated with better cognitive performance. The practical protocol: try compressing your eating window to 8 to 10 hours per day. Start with a 12-hour overnight fast, simply stopping eating by 8 p.m. and having breakfast at 8 a.m. and build from there. Eliminate or dramatically reduce sugary beverages, white bread, pastries, and ultra-processed snack foods. These are not just empty calories, they are actively impairing your brain's insulin signaling every single day. Now let's talk about something that affects virtually every person watching this, and yet its impact on the brain is profoundly underestimated. I'm talking about chronic stress and what it is doing to the most memory-critical structure in your brain, the hippocampus. Here's what most people understand about stress. It feels bad, it raises your heart rate, it affects your mood. What most people don't understand is that chronic stress, the low-grade, persistent stress that tens of millions of people live with every day, is physically destroying their memory hardware. When you encounter a stressor, your hypothalamus triggers a cascade through the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which ultimately drives the release of cortisol from the adrenal glands. Cortisol in the short term is adaptive. It sharpens your focus. It mobilizes energy. It prepares you to respond. But the hippocampus, your primary memory structure, is packed with glucocorticoid receptors. It is highly sensitive to cortisol. And when cortisol levels remain chronically elevated, the hippocampus pays an enormous price. Research published across decades of neuroscience has documented that chronic stress causes a measurable shrinkage of hippocampal dendrites, the branches through which neurons communicate, and reduces dendritic spine density, meaning the physical connection points between brain cells literally disappear. Chronic high cortisol also suppresses adult neurogenesis in the hippocampus, meaning it actively blocks the growth of new brain cells in the very region responsible for forming new memories. And it reduces the volume of the hippocampus itself. This is not subtle. This is structural damage to your brain's memory center damage that accumulates over months and years of unmanaged chronic stress. And this has direct, measurable consequences on your ability to recall information. High doses of cortisol have been shown to selectively impair verbal declarative memory, your ability to recall words, facts, and events without affecting non-hippocampal memory functions. Chronic stress also impairs the glymphatic system, reducing the brain's ability to clear toxic proteins overnight, creating a compounding cycle of damage. So what are the proven interventions? The evidence here is clear and practical. Mindfulness meditation, even 10 to 15 minutes per day, has been shown to measurably reduce cortisol levels and support neuroplasticity. Yoga, which combines breath regulation with movement and mindful attention, has shown in a 2024 study to improve working memory capacity in older women at risk for cognitive decline. Diaphragmatic breathing, slow, deep breathing from the belly directly activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which counteracts the stress response in real time. And consistent, quality sleep is itself one of the most powerful cortisol regulators in the body, another reason why protecting your sleep is non-negotiable. The daily protocol: build a 10-minute morning or evening mindfulness practice. Try box breathing. Inhale for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. Hold for 4 whenever you feel stress building. Identify and limit your primary chronic stressors where possible. And recognize that managing your stress is not a luxury or a soft wellness choice. It is one of the most clinically important things you can do for your long-term brain health. This brings us to our fifth and final habit, and I've saved it for last because I want to leave you with something that you can begin doing today and see real effects from within weeks. I'm talking about physical movement, but specifically the right type and timing of exercise for brain repair and memory enhancement. We already established that aerobic exercise is the most potent known trigger of BDNF, your brain's growth factor. But I want to go deeper here because the evidence has become even more specific and more exciting in recent years. A major 2024 analysis by researchers at the University of South Australia examined data from 133 randomized controlled trials to determine how different types of exercise impact brain health. The findings were striking. Activities that elevate heart rate aerobic exercise, cardio, are significantly better for brain health than low-intensity movement alone. Neurologists confirm the mechanism. Increased heart rate drives increased cerebral blood flow, which delivers oxygen, glucose, and growth factors directly to brain tissue. More blood flow to the brain means more fuel, more repair signals, and more neuroprotective molecules reaching vulnerable neurons. And here's what makes this even more remarkable. A study cited in the International Journal of Behavioral Nutrition and Physical Activity found that adults between 50 and 83 years old who added just 30 minutes of moderate to vigorous exercise on a given day performed better on memory tests taken a full 24 hours later. One session of exercise improved memory measurable the next day. This is not a long-term intervention study. This is one workout creating a 24-hour window of enhanced memory consolidation. But there's another layer here that most people miss, and it connects back to everything we've discussed today. Exercise enhances the glymphatic system. Research in a 2024 paper in Frontiers in Integrative Neuroscience proposed that physical exercise may be the missing link that directly activates glymphatic clearance, the same overnight brain cleaning system we discussed in the first section. Exercise increases the flow of cerebrospinal fluid, enhances the function of the AQP4 water channels that are critical for glymphatic transport, and reduces the accumulation of amyloid-beta in the brain. In other words, exercising during the day primes your glymphatic system to clean more efficiently at night. The two habits are synergistic. You exercise, you sleep, your brain clears, repairs, and rebuilds. The practical protocol here is straightforward. Aim for a minimum of 150 minutes of moderate aerobic activity per week. That's roughly 22 minutes per day. Brisk walking counts, cycling counts, swimming, dancing, jogging, anything that meaningfully elevates your heart rate. If you can include 2 to 3 sessions per week of higher intensity effort where you're breathing hard and can't hold a full conversation, the BDNF response will be significantly greater. Importantly, morning exercise has the additional benefit of resetting your circadian rhythm and improving your sleep architecture that night, which in turn enhances your glymphatic clearance. It is a virtuous cycle. Add resistance training 2 days per week. Muscle tissue releases its own set of brain supportive molecules called myokines that travel to the brain and work alongside BDNF to support neuroplasticity and cognitive function. A combination of aerobic and resistance training gives you the most complete neuroprotective stimulus. Before we move to our final closing thoughts, I want to reinforce something for our community. If you're watching this and you've been implementing some of these strategies, I want to hear from you in the comments. What has made the most difference for your mental clarity, your focus, or your sleep? And if you haven't started yet, which of these 5 habits feels most achievable for you this week? Drop your answer below. This community learns from each other, and your experience matters. If this content is new to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with a parent, a partner, a friend who is struggling with focus or memory, because the reality is that this information has the power to genuinely change the trajectory of someone's health. So let's bring this together and talk about what you now know and what you need to do. Your brain is not passively aging. It is actively, every single night, every single day, responding to the inputs you give it. And what science has revealed in the last decade is that the line between a sharp, resilient brain at 70 and a brain struggling with memory at 60 is drawn largely by daily habits, not by destiny. The first habit is protecting and optimizing your sleep, not just the quantity, but the quality. Your brain's glymphatic system, the network that flushes amyloid-beta and tau out of your neural tissue, is active almost exclusively during deep, slow-wave sleep. A randomized crossover trial published in Nature Communications confirmed that this system increases the clearance of Alzheimer's biomarkers during normal sleep compared to sleep deprivation. Sleep on your side. Keep your room cool and dark. Eliminate alcohol before bed. Treat sleep as your brain's most important healing window. The second habit is supporting BDNF production through the right nutrition and movement. Omega-3 fatty acids from fatty fish and high-quality supplements, combined with regular aerobic exercise, are the two most research-supported strategies for elevating BDNF, the molecule that drives neurogenesis, synaptic strength, and memory formation. A high-sugar, insulin-resistant metabolic state does the opposite, suppressing BDNF and shrinking your hippocampus over time. The third habit is restoring brain insulin sensitivity through dietary intervention. Reducing refined carbohydrates, compressing your eating window, and incorporating periods of metabolic fasting are not just strategies for body composition. They are clinically documented tools for reducing brain aging, improving neuronal insulin signaling, and enhancing both executive function and memory. The fourth habit is managing chronic stress not as a vague wellness goal, but as a specific neurological imperative. Chronically elevated cortisol physically damages the hippocampus, shrinks its dendritic architecture, suppresses neurogenesis, and impairs glymphatic clearance. A daily mindfulness or breathwork practice of even 10 minutes is a legitimate neuroprotective intervention supported by peer-reviewed evidence. And the fifth habit is consistent aerobic exercise, particularly the kind that elevates your heart rate and has you breathing hard. One session of moderate to vigorous exercise improves memory measurably 24 hours later. Regular exercise over 12 weeks produces brain health benefits comparable to the most powerful pharmacological interventions researchers have tested. It triggers BDNF. It primes the glymphatic system, it reduces neuroinflammation, it grows the hippocampus. It is, without any exaggeration, the most well-studied brain protective intervention on Earth. Here's the challenge I want to leave you with today. Don't try to implement all 5 at once. Pick one. The one that resonates most deeply, or the one that feels most immediately achievable. Maybe tonight you go to bed 30 minutes earlier and turn off alcohol for 1 week. Maybe tomorrow morning you put on your shoes and walk for 30 minutes before breakfast. Maybe you start compressing your eating window and having your last meal by 7 in the evening. Just one. And track how your body and your mind respond. Because the brain's capacity to adapt to change, to repair, to grow is one of the most profound and hopeful truths in all of biology. You are not locked into any trajectory. The science says clearly it is not too late. And the habits that protect and rebuild your brain are available to every single one of you starting today. If this video added value to your understanding and brought you one step closer to taking control of your cognitive health, please do something simple like this video and subscribe to join our growing community of people who are choosing to optimize their health naturally based on real science and real strategy. We are here every week with more evidence-based content to help you live longer, think sharper, and feel better at every age. Until next time, take care of your brain tonight. It is working hard for you while you sleep.